Hello, and welcome to today's MSD Pledge Small Business Summit. My name is Corinne Towler. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve the National Safety Council as director of the MSD Solutions Lab. You're joining us today for our first Small Business Summit for the MSD Solutions Lab community. I want to express a huge thank you to everyone in our audience for your leadership in actively seeking to transform workplace safety and reduce the risk of musculoskeletal disorders for your employees. Before we dive into today's content, we'd love to hear from you during this event. So if you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll do our best to answer those questions during the Q&A portion at the end of our program. One more note, October is National Women's Small Business Month and also National Ergonomics Month, two topics that are near and dear to our hearts here. We're proud to work with businesses of all sizes, but today we'd like to make a special mention of our women-run small businesses in attendance today. Shout out to all of you. We're also very proud to have a special guest speaker with us who has been a passionate advocate for small businesses his entire career. Mark Madrid serves as the Associate Administrator for the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, the OED, at the U.S. Small Business Administration, where he oversees SBA's National Resource Network, including Small Business Development Centers, Women's Business Centers, SCORE, and the Office of Entrepreneurship Education. Previously, he served as CEO of Latino Business Action Network and was named the 2019 Silicon Valley Nonprofit CEO of the Year by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. And he's the proud son of a small business owner. Welcome, Associate Administrator Madrid.
Thank you, Corinne, and thank you, NSC. I'm energized and grateful and blessed to be here at your inaugural Small Business Summit. And a special thank you to all the small business owners in the audience. All you're responsible for is nearly half of America's workforce, 2/3 of new net jobs. So it's an honor to be with you. I say it all the time, it's the highest honor imaginable to serve U.S. small businesses. I grew up in a small business family. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in this office with this beautiful American flag and this beautiful SBA flag, but for a family-owned business. My mom and dad, they met on the cotton fields and they said, that's not our future. We're gonna build and erect a welding business. And, unfortunately, we lost my dad to COVID-19 and almost lost my mother at the same time. Fortunately, she survived. But this is the ultimate tribute to family-owned business. And so I'm delighted to talk about the intersection of business with workplace safety. And I have to give a shout out to NSC. Specifically, since COVID-19, you have vastly expanded the number of webinars and accessibility points, internet trainings available on a range of topics, including drones, exoskeletons, virtual and augmented reality, and work in confined spaces. Thank you for your service to this country. And I'm delighted to be here and to, she has big shoes, our administrator, Isabella Casillas Guzman, our administrator of the SBA, and also a President Biden cabinet official. She says all the time that small businesses are the giants of our economy, and she is right. She also has charged us, and I report directly to Administrator Guzman, to be more customer first, technology forward, and advancing equity. I also echo those sentiments from the president and the vice president in terms of honoring our small business spaces, meeting small businesses where they are. And that's what we're doing here. And so I'm delighted to be here. I lead the technical and educational footprint of the SBA along with other units. We're one agency, but really it's about the technical assistance, how we can meet small businesses where they are and try to, help them persist through the pandemic, on toward a navigation and a pathway for success and prosperity. We do that through our amazing 68 district offices across the country, our SBA resource partners that include small business development centers, women's business centers. I was happy to hear that shout out to women entrepreneurs, one of the fastest growing segments of this space. Also our SCORE chapters, which are mentors, volunteer mentors across the country, and our community navigators through our Community Navigator Pilot Program, reaching new places and new terrains when it comes to small businesses in urban and rural America. But here, I'm going to be short of wind but full of passion, and underscore the work of the NSC. Workplace injuries are a serious topic, and that's why I'm here representing the administrator. And small businesses can see large returns on investment when taking steps toward workplace safety. Musculoskeletal disorders, MSDs, are one of the largest causes of workplace injuries that can hurt a small business's bottom line through missed days of work and workers' comp. I'm sure you all can relate to that. And MSDs alone cause 1/3 of workplace injuries, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and cause workers to miss weeks of work. And at this time, especially when we're talking about those small businesses with 10 employees or less, 5 employees or less, maybe it's me, myself, and I, you're a solo entrepreneur, we have to put measures in place so that you can feel empowered to have this workplace safety and empower the workers around you. Using OSHA estimates, a single MSD can cost over $60,000 in health and workers' comp payments, lost productivity, retraining our employees, and repairing any equipment or asset damage. So ergonomic solutions are more than just fancy pieces of furniture and technology. Can you relate to that statement? Because I've grown so much in this space, understanding how important this is. So they can include simple and economical steps that only can help small businesses grow and prosper. Small businesses are a vital part of the American economy. You can hear it, I'm on the edge of my seat. I say it every day, are a vital part of our American economy. And we all want to get them access to the simple and effective ergonomic and other solutions that will help them and their workers thrive. So you're in the right place. NSC, OSHA, and other organizations share best practices that small businesses can access, including guides, posters, and helpful videos. NSC can work with small businesses to identify an individual's business safety needs and understand any unique conditions. Why is all this important? It's at the end, at the beginning, and at the end of the day, it's about honoring our employees. And by doing so, there's nothing but upside, increased productivity, increased buy-in, increased workforce development, and increased retention. It can also help you with increased effectiveness when it comes to recruitment. All this is coming from the heart, because I'll close where I started, gratitude. I can't imagine this economy, what we've been through, not only this in the past recent years, but in other years where we've gone through challenges. Who has stepped up to support our economy, to uplift our economy, and give us a sense of passion and inspiration? It's our small business owners. And for that, I thank you once again for joining us on this most important topic. Have a wonderful inaugural Small Business Summit, and we're just fortunate to be a small part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Associate Minister Madrid. I will throw out there, my son is currently studying to be a welder. So your comments really resonate with me, and I hope that he can continue your family tradition of success in that world. So we're really honored by the opportunity to work with SBA in support of our small businesses across the country with tools and resources specifically to help improve workplace safety. In a few moments, you'll hear from WorkSafeBC's Occupational Hygiene Officer, Gina Valhas, who will share key insights on ways to help reduce the risk of MSDs so that our audience can understand what kind of investment is really needed. Then we'll bring you a moderated conversation led by Malcolm Glenn from Meteorite to discuss creative and attainable solutions for small businesses. He will be joined by Dr. Anthony Harris, who's the founder of HFit Health, and Bryan Statham, who's the founder and CEO of LifeBooster. Later, we'll ask for all of you to drop your questions into the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Malcolm will make sure we get to as many of your questions as possible before we close out today's event. And last, I'll wrap up our event reviewing some new resources and some upcoming events, closing promptly at 2 Eastern. Before I pass the mic to Gina, let me share a bit about the National Safety Council MSD Solutions Lab. It's a first of its kind strategic initiative funded by Amazon to reduce workplace musculoskeletal injuries by engaging shared stakeholders, conducting research, identifying solutions, and scaling the results so all workplaces can benefit. One of our key initiatives is the MSD Pledge, a global movement of employers across industries of all sizes to transform workplace safety and reduce the risk of musculoskeletal disorders, the most common workplace injury. And with that, as you see on your screen, by signing the pledge, organizations commit to analyze the causes of MSD injuries and invest in solutions and practices that reduce risks to workers, leverage best practices and share learnings to improve safety practices, and build a culture of safety where everyone at every level is accountable for safety and health. Of course, the goal of our work together ultimately is to reduce MSD risk and resulting injuries across our collaborative pledge community by 25% by the year 2025. Together, we're creating safer outcomes for millions of workers worldwide. Signing the pledge is completely free, and organizations who take that step gain access to a wealth of resources to advance their safety programs. You can visit nsc.org/MSD Pledge to learn more, and we really hope you'll join us in this important work. Since launching of the pledge in June, our community has grown to over 120 MSD Pledge member companies, employing more than 2.5 million people across diverse industries. We have the honor of having organizations like HFit and Human Balance and Stability Systems to Pentair and LifeBooster, all as part of our community. Please consider this my invitation to you to join us. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Gina Valhas, an expert who holds many titles. Gina is a Canadian certified professional ergonomist, a certified health and safety consultant, and a certified psychological health and safety advisor with over 25 years of experience. She is now with the Occupational Health and Safety Regulator in British Columbia, Canada at WorkSafeBC. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you so much, Corinne. I really am excited to be here and so great to be part of this wonderful summit and also to be talking about small business, one of my favorite topics. So yes, I'm going to start this session now with talking about some ideas that can help reduce the risk of MSDs. So next slide, please. So when you first take a look at these photos here, what comes to mind? You might remember this movie Elf and think, funny, and I would agree. It's obvious that the shower is not designed for someone his size. We can see he has to bend his back to use the shower. And, what will he have to do to wash his hair? He's going to have to bend right now and get his head underneath that shower head. And, he's going to be crouching even more than he is now. And do you think that you could do that if you had no soreness in your back and your neck? You probably could, right? You can get away with it for some time, but over time, it starts to build up in our body. And eventually, how are you going to be feeling? So this is what actually happens with MSDs. Most people don't realize where they come from, just that they eventually feel pain, even though there's nothing in the routine that's changed. And alongside the MSD is performance. How long is it going to actually take him to shower, and how good of a job can you actually do? When things are designed to fit our bodies and the way that we think and our organizational systems, then we actually can do our best as well as reduce injuries. So the science of ergonomics, which is also known as human factors, has identified specific risk factors that can contribute to MSDs. And these photos here are showing one of the main ones, which is awkward posture. In our next slide, we'll see here that there's another awkward posture, helping a child to turn on the taps to wash your hands. Imagine how many times a day this awkward posture happens when you work with small children. They're on the floor, so very low to the ground, so there's a lot of bending. And that brings another risk factor in, which is repetition, and looking at how many times that movement happens, that task happens, or that type of risk factor. And also combined with duration, which is how long someone is exposed to that risk factor. So what could a solution be for this situation? Well, we can build sinks lower and with shorter depth so that children can wash their hands themselves. And now we've eliminated the bending that occurs with this task. You might think, are they actually doing a good job? Well, guess what? They are, because they love to play with the soap and the water, so it's all good. So our next main risk factor is force, which is dependent on several factors. The image on this slide shows us the maximum weight limit for an infrequent lift that occurs for less than an hour in total per day, and is the perfect two-handed lift of a stable box with handles and within the size of your body. it helps us to understand how the weight limit changes according to where the load is located vertically as well as horizontally. So if you look right by the waist, close to the body, the weight limit starts at 70 pounds if the load is within 4 inches of the body. And if you move that load away horizontally, the weight limit actually drops to 20 pounds. So you can see how quickly and how much the weight limit actually changes according to where that load is horizontally. And if you look down at the feet, the load, or below knee height, the load limit is 30 pounds. So again, it drops drastically. And I was listening to one of the last summit, and I heard Schneider Electric has dropped their weight limits to 26 pounds. And you can see how that kind of can fit with a lot of these limits here. So the next situation we're going to take a look at here is about lifting a pot of hot oil, a common occurrence in restaurants. And we have an unstable load with liquid that's moving around. And one of the things that can happen here is there is, obviously potential for a back injury. But as you can see in this photo here, is that you can actually spill that oil and, can create a horrific burn and incident. And unfortunately, this did happen. And these pictures are from a video that we have at WorkSafeBC. And, when I look at the situation, I think, what's the effect of an injury like this on a person? It's definitely traumatizing and can result in a permanent disability. But when we look at solutions in our next slide, thanks, we come up with a very simple one. And I'll just get you to go to the next picture there for me. Thank you so much. And that's a cart, right? I mean, this is not rocket science. It's very simple. If that pot is on a cart, then you can just wheel that over to where you need to take it. And this one even has a pump on it so that you can not have to pour the oil and that sort of thing. So there are solutions out there that can take away the situations that can create harm. So in our next picture, we'll see that this job here requires the worker to pour liquid from a 300 to 400 pound drum into an in-floor vat. Now the workers would use cardboard under this heavy drum. I mean, can you imagine trying to move this around to help them reduce the effort and make it a little bit easier to pour this liquid? However, the cardboard that they were using prevented the metal of the drum from touching the metal of the steel floor plate, which was required to cancel the static charge. So as they were pouring that liquid, there would be some static charge that would happen, and the liquid is flammable. So the static charge actually ignited this liquid, resulting in an explosion. So the results of this incident would have been classified as an explosion and not an MSD, but it's definitely come about from a manual handling situation and could have easily have been an MSD. And likely the workers may have already been experiencing symptoms, but nothing happened in terms of controls. So the actual number of incidents that could be improved through ergonomics and human factors is much higher than the number of MSDs. So be sure to look at all the manual handling in the workplace. So just taking a look at our next picture here, we'll see that one more picture for us is a very simple solution in this one is a drum tilter. And again, it's actually very low cost, especially when you factor in the cost of the injury itself. And of course, in this situation, it was a fatality, but if it was a back injury, it's still less than that. So something very simple could have actually prevented a fatality as well as MSDs. So we're going to take now a look at just some other situations that have happened or other solutions that exist, just to give you some ideas and get some creative thoughts going around possibilities. We can see here there's a vacuum lift and we've got a stair climbing dolly, which are both extremely useful. And in the next slide here, we'll have a few more solutions. So there's manual material lifts, and so they'll move the products that you need up and down. We're seeing these in places even where someone's working on a ladder and they've got to get the equipment and the materials, their supplies, up next to them. So this is something that they can use. And there's also a ladder dolly that can make it a lot easier to move those ladders. And we can move on to the next slide and see a few more solutions. And this one here is one of my favorites, this tread on this remote dolly basically can go over all sorts of different types of terrain, because that's a common thing that we hear is, oh, well, it's, it's not a flat floor that we're dealing with here, right? We've got lots of different terrain that we've got to work on. And it actually can even go upstairs. So, those situations where you'd have 4 or 5, 6 workers trying to carry up, a hot water tank or something like that up the stairs, that takes, this machine can take the place of that. And then we also have a tugger here, which can help to pull loads. So we can move on to the next slide. Thanks. So all of these are examples of the practice of ergonomics, which is also called human factors. And this is really about understanding the interactions of the human and other elements of the system in order to optimize human well-being and overall system and organizational performance. So it's really, about that overall picture that we're trying to get at. And when we're looking at types of solutions that we're looking at in the next slide, we'll see that really, the best time to involve ergonomics human factors is at the beginning of a project, any kind of new design or innovation that you've got going on. And this slide here shows that in blue, you can have the most influence when you get started at the beginning, and it's the lowest cost. So in red is showing the cost. And when you get to the end of that project, the red is now, your costs are going way up to make any kind of changes. And you actually have very little influence mainly because of the cost and the effort to go and make those changes at the late stage. So I'm not sure what stage of design that you might be in, but at some point in time, you might find yourself doing some kind of renovation. So remember this situation here, and definitely, look at, you don't need to wait for a design or a new project to actually implement changes. You can go ahead and get started right away. And with that, we'll take it back to Corinne and move on to the next part of the session. So thank you so much for allowing me to share some of my knowledge with you.
Thank you, Gina. We could have used that dolly moving pre-mentioned son into his college home not that long ago. All right. So thanks so much for sharing those tips and techniques. Lots of great practical solutions there that really can help get our minds using a little more creativity around finding some fairly simple solutions. So now I want to welcome Malcolm Glenn, who's a senior advisor with our partners at Meteorite, to lead our panelist discussion. Malcolm, on to you.
Well, thank you so much, Corinne. First off, for all of the National Safety Council's contributions to this work and for everything that you do. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I'm really excited to lead the next part of the conversation where we're going to discuss some simple, low-cost solutions that I think all small business owners can implement to ensure the safety of their workers. So as Corinne said, my name is Malcolm Glenn, and I'm a senior advisor at Meteorite, and I'm also the founder and CEO of MG Equity Consulting, which is an advisory firm that helps organizations really embed equity in both their internal functions as well as their external facing efforts too. And I'm so excited to continue to have the conversation with Gina in this next part of our conversation, as well as to welcome 2 additional experts in their fields. Both of these folks have decades of experience in occupational health and safety, from wearable technology to digital safety. So I'll quickly introduce them both, and then we can have a little bit of a conversation. So first off, we have Dr. Anthony Harris, who is a founder, leader, and speaker in workplace health and wellness. He's board certified in occupational and environmental medicine, and he's provided advisory services to some of America's largest companies. He's also the founder of HFit Health, which provides clinical and technical solutions to today's workplace health challenges. Dr. Harris, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And we're also joined today by Bryan Statham. And Bryan has focused on issues of health, safety, and wellness for nearly 2 decades. He's the co-founder and CEO of LifeBooster, which is a market-leading data analytics company serving customers across all sectors of the industrial economy on a mission to ensure every worker gets home safe every day. I love that. Bryan, thank you for joining us as well. And again, thank you to Gina for staying with us. And before we dive in, I will just reiterate what Corinne said at the beginning. Please do submit your questions via the Zoom Q&A box. I'll do my best to save a little bit of time towards the end to make sure that we hear from you as well. And I'm sure our panelists would love to hear from you too. Okay, with that, I think we can go ahead and dive into the conversation. So maybe I can start off the conversation with a little bit of a high level question. What are some challenges small businesses face in addressing MSDs? And Bryan, maybe I can start off with you and then we can hear from Dr. Harris, and Gina would love your thoughts as well. So again, what are some challenges small businesses face in addressing MSDs?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Malcolm. And hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and talk to everybody and provide some of our knowledge around supporting small businesses and large businesses as well, really take more of a proactive approach to musculoskeletal disorder prevention. So yeah, when it comes to small challenges for small businesses, and we have a small business as well, I look at it in sort of four areas. So first, costs and a limited budget. So generally speaking, smaller operating budgets are available for ergonomics and safety. And so there's usually less capital to really invest in programming and developing those risk controls to be really proactive, which can be a challenge, right? And so budgets typically are a bit smaller. Second, we also see a lack of ergonomic expertise on the team as a whole. And this could be due to the fact that the on-team health and safety professional doesn't necessarily have specific expertise in ergonomics, or that what ends up happening is you've got health and safety professionals or even ergonomics or safety being overseen by somebody that's actually hasn't gone through and learned about health and safety practices. So we're seeing diverse and distributed responsibilities in smaller organizations as well, where people are wearing multiple hats. So for example, my background isn't specifically in health and safety. I'm the CEO of a company where I'm doing marketing, I'm doing sales, I'm doing finances. So this happens in smaller organizations as well, where ergonomics may end up being the responsibility of someone with very limited experience in, or even just expertise in ergonomics. And then the last item is really around program maturity. So a lot of times with smaller organizations, it tends to be more of a proactive culture of health and safety. And that's generally caused by less time and resources to really dedicate to ergonomics, meaning the program is likely going to end up being reactive and responding to emergent injuries versus being proactive in measuring and mitigating ergonomic risk factors.
Thank you for that, Bryan. Dr. Harris, would love to hear from you next. What are some of the challenges that you see among small businesses trying to address MSDs?
Sure. So on the secondary or tertiary prevention side, and I want to say first, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and super excited today to speak to this very important topic nationally, internationally, around MSDs and how we can prevent. But one of the biggest opportunities for prevention is considered secondary or tertiary prevention. And unfortunately, when we're talking about preventing your next musculoskeletal injury, oftentimes it's a preceding musculoskeletal injury that presents the biggest risk factor to re-injury, right? And that's pointed out with back injury, for example. The number one cause of or risk factor for a back injury is a previous back injury. And so what do we do about that? And access to great occupational health or great care to provide preventative measures to help prevent that injury from recurring is something that we need as a community to focus in on in terms of access. And oftentimes we see small businesses not having great access to care locally. And there are solutions to that in regards to leveraging technology. Me being a technophile and our organization being tech forward clinically, telemedicine is going to benefit that in terms of access to that secondary and tertiary preventative measures. And then another factor that is germane to the plight of small businesses in regards to musculoskeletal prevention is the culture piece, right? Knowing from top down the true impact in regards to return on investment of musculoskeletal prevention is going to be by far and away what sets forth the culture for a small business. And as Bryan has mentioned, the CEO is tasked with setting culture, and oftentimes just the knowing the raw numbers in terms of return on investment is something that, as a small business owner myself, we often don't see, or we often don't have the opportunity to be exposed to those type of metrics. But certainly that's why we're here today, to speak to these metrics and why they're important and how it can affect the bottom line in terms of investment of dollars for musculoskeletal prevention, and what that's going to do to help us on the profit side, not just of keeping workers safe and preventing lost time, but also around increased productivity. So those definitely are two factors that play a role in the day-to-day in small business.
Yeah, those are great points, Dr. Harris and Bryan. I think, yeah, totally hit the nail on the head with all that. I think, one of the things that I often see too is the space, and it's related to both things that you guys have talked about in terms of, money and, resources. And so oftentimes I see that people are building, they're storing their stuff higher and they're building things up because they trying to maximize, the space that they have. And, so looking at situations where they might be doing some more work at above shoulder height and thinking about, what are they putting up there in terms of controls? And I know we always jump to controls first, right? But yeah, definitely lots of challenges with small business.
I love that you all talked about different things, but also touched on some commonalities across these challenges, right? We're all strapped for time in a small business community, right? We're all worried about costs. We're all worried about technology. But cost, I know, is particularly top of mind for a lot of people who are on this call today. So I actually want to stick on that point. We know ergonomic solutions don't have to be expensive, but sometimes they feel like they are. So what are some simple, affordable solutions that you all have implemented and other employers can implement in their workplaces? For whoever wants to jump in.
I can. Okay, go ahead, Gina.
I was just going to say, just because I was kind of starting to go down that path in terms of looking at how, what are you putting up high, and looking at just repositioning those sorts of things, and thinking about, having items that are light to be up higher, and, items that are heavier to be kind of closer to your body. And thinking about that lift lower calculator image that I was showing, having those items kind of closer to your waist, hip height. And I'll let Bryan jump in there and provide some other solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think both Anthony and Gina, you both touched on some really important pieces. Is that ergonomics, it doesn't need to be super complex. Sometimes the best solution is very, very simple. And it's generally some of the first things that we think about when we're looking at different types of controls or different process adjustments or whatever the case may be, or training, and also culture, building that culture within your organization, getting people thinking about it. It's not just a responsibility of the safety team, but it's also the responsibility of operations and everyone involved, right? So creating that really engaged culture is extremely important. Just talking a little bit more about what Gina was discussing, when you're looking at equipment and for workstations or for specific tasks, we're ensuring that the workers have access to the right equipment, that it's properly adjusted to reflect the individuals as well, is going to be really important. But one piece that I think is a fairly inexpensive approach is really around just the education and training perspective. Like, bring it into your safety talks if you have those at the beginning of shift, or even in your management meetings or whatever the case, because providing those learning opportunities to teach employees about ergonomic risk factors and strategies for preventing musculoskeletal disorders is really important. And there's some great resources out there. We're in Vancouver, Canada, and one of the it's called the Center of Research Expertise for the Prevention of MSDs, CRE MSD. They have some great resources online that you can find to help encourage and support a lot of those educational and training programs. So I highly recommend taking a look at those types of organizations that are supporting with free materials, and MSD Solutions Lab as well. Micro breaks are always a great one too, ensuring that your frontline teams are having the ability to take those intermittent micro breaks. You can use technologies or different types of visual assessments to determine when is the right time to put those types of controls in place. And it just helps to get up and mobilize their joints and mitigate, sort of those prolonged sedentary periods, right? And so I think that just encouraging, more stretching. We have a company that is full of developers sitting at their desks, crunching code, and they're in a static posture for the majority of their day. How can we encourage them to actually get up and move around and go to the lunchroom and have a chat have a water cooler chat, and move around, place your garbage cans a little bit further away, and things like that you can do just to help get people up and moving and really creating overall total worker wellness is going to be important.
Yeah, and I'll comment as well in regards to, it begins with a free investment of just knowledge, right? Understanding, is the investment of ergonomics, musculoskeletal prevention, going to work for my organization? And if we look at data from Institute of Work and Health, they just published May of this year, data pointing towards tremendous return on investment in multiple industries. So whether you're in manufacturing, you have an opportunity to see a 24% return on investment. If you're in transportation, that number is 114% of return on investment. And construction, 34% return on investment, right? And so it's time and away, willingness to invest in educating management, starting top down, on this is something that is worthwhile in terms of the bottom line benefit to the organization, as well as obviously to the health and wellness of the workers. And so, and as Bryan has mentioned, simple things, right? If you have computer workers, there's a rule called the 20-20-20 rule, right? Where every 20 minutes you take a break and you look at something that's 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And that's been shown to decrease risk for something called computer vision syndrome, where it can lead to irritated eyes, lead to headaches, lead to other factors that can decrease the productivity of your workers and their satisfaction with their job. This is ever more an impactful circumstance now that we have a larger remote workforce, even amongst the small business community, right? And so ergonomics, office ergonomics is probably worse. It's been shown to be worse in the home setting than it has been, certainly from a control standpoint, been something more difficult for us as small business owners to effectuate change. And so we need to pay attention to how we can provide those interventions remotely. One of the acronyms I love is called CURE, right? CURE for MSDs. I love it because I came up with it, but it's simply some of the things we've already mentioned, right? C stands for culture, right? Focusing in on culture. If we look at data or teachings from Patrick Lencioni, we know that culture is the plate upon which everything else sits in an organization to prevent or to get and drive towards an outcome. In this case, musculoskeletal prevention. And injury prevention. And then U stands for understanding, right? That's the educational piece. We've talked about that obviously already, but it is paramount that we educate our workforce, our workers, on the importance of why, right? It begins with why, as Simon Sinek has told us in his publications. And then R is for reinforcement, right? This is super important. It's not only that you have to kind of set out to communicate what the culture should be, but you have to reinforce it in the day-to-day. That's where you're going to get the habitual formation for the workforce, right? This is what Charles Duhigg has talked about, what James Clear has talked about in terms of setting the impetus for change, right? If we know habit forming, there's 4 stages. There's the cue, there's the craving, there's the response, and then there's the reward, right? And you have to set each of those aspects in order to get the workforce to change. Now, fortunately, small businesses have an opportunity to make cultural changes very quickly, relatively speaking, in terms of compared to that of larger organizations that make gradual steps. So let's take advantage of that size advantage in regards to cultural change. And then finally, in terms of the cure, empowerment, right? Empowerment of the workers to actually effectuate change. Let's reference Taiichi Ohno, the father of lean manufacturing. The things that he instituted to help the Toyota company back in the 40s was instrumental in regards to empowering the workers to actually stop production if they saw a defect in quality, right? And what he found is that by making the worker empowered to do so, not only improved the worker satisfaction in terms of their engagement, but also improved the quality of the product because they were empowered to make a difference. So too can we do that when we're talking ergonomic intervention. If a worker sees something, experiences something that they believe to be problematic or at risk for musculoskeletal, being able to stop and point out what should change, that continuous process improvement is a cornerstone towards changing and preventing what we know to be best practice around musculoskeletal. So I'll leave and end with that one so we can move to the next topic.
I just love how everything that the three of you talked about was really actionable. You talked about these really simple solutions, everything from training to safety talks at the beginning of shifts to education in all directions. I love that 20-20-20 rule, Dr. Harris. I'm probably going to try to apply that in the context of my own work as well as this focus on culture. All of these things that I suspect anyone, kind of whatever version of a small business they look like, can implement probably in the short term as well. I think that's going to be super useful for the folks who have tuned in today. That said, there are some times when we need to make bigger investments in bigger solutions. So I want to shift a little bit and talk a little bit about some of those investments as well. How can small business owners best determine which higher investment solutions can produce the greatest return on investment for their businesses? Bryan, maybe we could start with you and we can hear from everyone else too.
Sure, sounds good. Again, I've got 4 that we really look at when it comes to higher investments, because it's really important to just have the information at your fingertips. And the first one that we always talk about leads into, again, the culture piece. That what we talk about is participatory engagement, right? Engage your frontline teams, understand their current experiences, leverage them to understand what type of ergonomic controls would be really most effective in addressing their current challenges and the discomfort that they may have in their work processes and tasks. I think it's just so important to engage them. They're the ones that are living it day in and day out. So let's hear from them. Let's get them involved. And I know when you go to the Ergo Expo and these different conferences, there's some challenges that go out to recognize these teams that are going out, the frontline teams that are actually coming up with new solutions. And it's really empowering to see that, and encouraging as well to understand that these large organizations are empowering their teams to build out different controls. So I think really working with your team, your frontline teams, is going to be important in understanding their challenges. Also, there's different types of ROI modeling and calculators out there. We have a pretty substantial one with our organization. So whenever we're going in to conversations with potential clients, really understanding their processes, understanding what type of controls they would be looking to implement, understanding their current injury rates and past historical rates, putting those all into these different calculators can really start to inform you of how much it's going to cost, but the ROI that you can potentially get from it as well. And so there's a lot of them out there to look at, and it's really going to help to understand how a control will impact the current MSD rates and direct and indirect costs that can occur from poor ergonomics. Another one is test it out. So instead of going in and implementing a solution that could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, let's just say, or tens of thousands of dollars, having an opportunity to test it out, right? So this could even be, instead of, if you're working with jackhammers, there's one company that we were working with, a small business. They're a box manufacturer, and they use jackhammers to split effectively the sheets of paper. And they're doing work up here, and they're using these really old jackhammers that were causing a tremendous amount of risk. Well, instead of going out and buying all new jackhammers for their team, why don't we use some technology, test out the hand-arm vibration assessment, do some posture analysis, and go in and understand before they make that big investment in getting new tools. I think it's really important to understand sort of the qualitative experience of frontline teams and engaging them in that process. It will provide at least the health safety professionals on the team with really valuable feedback, while also improving potential outcomes by making sure that you are introducing the right tools and ergonomic controls. And then lastly, quantify the impact. So when you're in addition to getting that qualitative feedback from testing it out from your frontline teams, conduct pre and post risk assessments. So at LifeBooster, we leverage our own sensor technology to directly compare and quantify how postural and repetitive motion risk factors change when we introduce, change to equipment design or process changes, or even behavioral interventions to verify the risk reduction impact. I think that's really important, quantifying that impact as well. Those are four things that we look at.
Gina,
I'll chime in.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in regards to, and I echo Bryan's sentiment in regards to doing that quantitative analysis up front, pre and post intervention, something we call A/B testing, right? And so to the question in terms of, how do you identify where your biggest bang for your buck is going to be? Leveraging technology is going to be something that small businesses have a huge opportunity around in regards to two things, right? When we're talking innovation and identifying opportunities, this is something I stole from a gentleman, Ken Dober, who headed up Johnson & Johnson's innovation team in surgery. They set out to do two things when they look to innovate. One is to de-skill, and two, to bend the cost curve, right? And so as you're identifying opportunities to put in interventions to prevent musculoskeletal disorders, what are the overlapping opportunities to, i.e., de-skill the action being done, right? And then where can you bend the cost curve by doing so, implementing your ergonomic solution? That ensures that you're doing that first perspective up front, ensures that you're going to get the return on investment multiple on the back end, right? And then when we're talking about the additional leveraging technology, it really is not just a colloquialism that we like to utter, right? Technology, technology, technology. For me, being a Keynesian economist, putting on the MBA hat, technology is the only thing that really moves up. It's the primary mover for our economy in terms of gains in productivity, gains of efficiency, right? And so by leveraging the technology of today, we can do things for far cheaper of an investment than we could in years past. For example, the technology today can even measure someone's pain, their body's response to pain. So imagine now in an affordable way, being able to look at day one of a job, how is someone experiencing this particular job, right? This is something OSHA has told us to do since the 90s, 1994 to the meatpacking industry, in regards to measuring someone's own experience performing whatever task, right? And so now we can leverage technology to objectively measure someone's experience. And then as we institute interventions, we can then understand how that improvement to an extent has been experienced by the individual, as well as their performance of a task. So there are a lot of opportunities to do that and more. And when we're talking wearable technology or new calculators for return on investment, and I think, we'll be sharing shameless plug for MSD Solution, right? We have a solution now that is free and allows our small businesses to access and understand what simple things they can do in the workplace to help get a multiple in terms of that return on investment up front. So there will be definitely more to come from this particular opportunity itself.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you, Bryan. I love how actionable everything has felt today. I'm biased because I myself am also a small business owner, but I am taking down notes and feverishly typing things because I'm learning so much from this conversation. I suspect we could continue the conversation for hours and hours and hours, but I am conscious of time. So let me ask each of you one final sort of wrap-up question. If you were to give sort of one point about why it's important for small business owners to prioritize MSD prevention, especially from an ROI perspective, what would that point be? Maybe we can start with Gina, and then we can go to Bryan, and then end with Dr. Harris.
Yeah, I think for me, what I've seen with small business, and even when you're by yourself, Malcolm, you talked about yourself, is that what's the impact if you're not able to do your work? If one of your workers can't help you, right? It's huge. And so thinking about it from that perspective of, what's my return on investment? If I spend $1,000 on a solution, and that's going to help me keep everyone healthy and safe and able to do our best, it's worth it.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, there's two ways that we look at it. It's, mind and heart. So I'll stick to mind for this one. But if you care about efficiency and profitability, then you should really care about ergonomics. I feel like poor ergonomics can mean inefficient work operations, poorly designed work equipment and work processes. It means unsustainable working conditions and, prevalent exposure to some of these higher risk work conditions as well. And so because of just the nature of musculoskeletal disorders, you may not be feeling the impact of these working hazards today, but these factors will have an impact on your MSD rates and organizational challenges later on. And so the best time to build an effective ergonomics program is really before you have any of these emergent MSD issues. The old saying, like 1 ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so this also helps employees feel safe and valued at work, and are more productive, confident, and enthusiastic. So.
Sure. So this is not a individual organizational issue, right? This is a national issue. This is an international issue, right? When we talk about, we've talked about the individual, organizational return on investment. That makes sense, right? But when we talk about where we are as a society, we have to look at the macroeconomics of it, right? We spend more on musculoskeletal disease in the U.S. particularly than cardiovascular, right? Than cancer, right? We spend $1 trillion a year on musculoskeletal disease. So this is something that is going to be central to the entire workforce. And we need small businesses to dial in on how to prevent musculoskeletal, because small businesses, according to SBA, makes up 99.9% of the workforce. Right. So big corporations can't do it. They can't move the needle by themselves. We have to participate in this endeavor if we're going to see an improvement overall in the health and wellness of our communities, of our nation, of our international partners. And we've all experienced passing on our workforce's next injury, right? The employee that comes from down the street that experienced a poor ergonomic setup, and now they're working with us, for us, and they continue to have symptoms, or God forbid, they have an injury that was born out of their previous work. And so by participating in this endeavor collectively, we can prevent that passing on injuries. That's going to enhance the experience of all workers nationwide.
I just love all of your framings, Dr. Harris, in particular, that framing that this is not an organizational issue, that this is actually an issue that we all have to think about. We all have to think about it at, quite frankly, a national level and even an international level. And I think that shared understanding of the importance of these solutions is part of the way in which we're going to be better at implementing them. So I just want to say thank you all for all of your contributions to this conversation. I know we're a little bit short on time, so I want to bring the audience in, and I want to jump to an audience question that we've received from Alan Ferguson, and I'll throw it out to any one of the three of you who might want to answer. Here's the question. From a practical standpoint, how should employers start the process of looking at where they can make ergonomic improvements and changes? What steps can they take? Anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I think really the first step is, seeing if anyone is feeling some soreness. And, if they are, then you'd want to start there. But if they're not, and sometimes they're not, because especially this, when things are just starting off, they're not really necessarily feeling anything. But what feels awkward, what is falling under our risk factors? So looking at, what are the MSD risk factors and looking for those in the workplace. And then from there, working on solutions to correct those.
And I 100% agree with that. And so yes, and add to that conversation. It begins with a conversation with your workforce of what you want to accomplish, right? Because, I've been there, we've all been there, where we set out for a goal, but we don't communicate that goal effective enough to the population, to the workforce, so that they're at ease at sharing. Look, we've experienced a worker who's afraid to share that they're having pain, of fear of repercussions from an employment standpoint, right? And so having that conversation up front lays the psychological safety, so to speak, right, for workers to open up about their experience from a musculoskeletal standpoint. And then the next step is exactly what Gina has discussed here.
Wonderful. Well, listen, those are phenomenally valuable takeaways. I love that you all talked about communication. As a communications professional by training, I'm very biased, but I think we cannot expect our employees to come along with us as we implement these solutions if we're not keeping them in the dialogue as much as we possibly can. Listen, we only have a couple minutes left. So again, I want to make sure we get out on time. So please join me in just thanking Dr. Harris, Bryan, and Gina. Thank you all for your time today and for the work all three of you do. Before we close out, though, I want to pass the mic back to Corinne, who's going to share a little bit about some MSD Pledge member resources, as well as a bit of info on a few upcoming events. Thank you all again. And Corinne, back over to you.
Awesome. Wow, great engaging conversation. Thanks all for that dialogue, and thanks all for being here. I'd really like to share just two newly released resources that are available to all. The first is our Small Business Guide to MSD Solutions, which will help you create a culture of safety in your organization, construct an effective MSD Solutions program, and also help you innovate and collaborate with other small businesses to help prevent these types of injuries among your workforce. The second resource that's newly released is a series of posters that we actually developed in partnership with the Resource Center Bryan mentioned earlier, the Center of Research Expertise for the Prevention of Musculoskeletal Disorders, or the CRE-MSD Center. Each poster describes a common workplace hazard that can lead to MSDs. It also gives some simple ideas for fixes. You can find these resources and more at nsc.org/MSD under our resource tab. You can also check the link in the chat. In addition to those online static resources, we're hosting a few additional educational events this year that I'd love to have you all join. Next month will be a virtual town hall linking safety to total worker health. It's on Thursday, November 10th from 1 to 2 Eastern Time. This session is being organized in collaboration with the CDC's NIOSH team and is designed to help you understand the important connections between safety and the overall health of your workforce. And if you're new to the MSD Pledge community, and want to learn more about how you can take advantage of the tools and resources and training and network with other community members, please join any of our new member orientations. The next one coming up is Thursday, October 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can pre-register for any of these, completing the poll on your screen. So as we wrap up, final thoughts. Again, thank you to all of our participants today. And I'd like to again extend a personal invitation and encourage you to visit nsc.org/MSD Pledge to learn more, to sign the pledge, take advantage of the tools and resources that we have created and are making available. And thank you once again for joining us today. Together, we will improve workplace safety, reduce MSD risks, and enhance the well-being of workers around the world. Have a fantastic day. Thanks all.